Yeah. Oh,
all right. Hey, y'all, we're back. I just talked about all the reasons you should subscribe to patreon.com/FloridaBBHour. That is, I'm just going to release that as a giant advertisement at the beginning of a separate podcast, and then hopefully people will just roll right into the next pod. But go to patreon.com/FloridaBBHour. Subscribe to our content. There's 3 membership tiers. 6-man club is going to give you everything. Rowdy Reptiles is going to give you a lot of stuff. It's not entirely arbitrary, like what you don't get. Like you didn't get the SEC championship game rewatch. Like, so if it's a super long video type thing, you're not going to get that content, but you're going to get most of the film studies. And then you're not going to get like breaking news, like some of the stuff that I'll do, but otherwise you'll get everything else. And then Game Day Gator, you're going to get game previews, game wraps, and then Patreon listener episode access to ask questions and stuff like that. So 3 different tiers. Subscribe. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be a fun season, I think. Yeah. Anyway, I don't even know if we're actually live on YouTube at this point or not. So in any event, it's good to be back with my man, Eric Fawcett.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting season, I think. And this is fun for a lot of fans who are getting the chance to really go through the full off season with expectations and excitement. Last year, it took well into December, I feel, for people to really realize that this was a team that could compete and ultimately win a championship. So it certainly wasn't like this, where coming out of the season immediately into the transfer portal, you're looking at these possible Gator targets as guys who could be some of the best in the country that could go compete for another Final Four and championship. So, of course, that was really fun. And just as more things trickle out, whether it be scheduling, whether it be practice information, all of that, it's all stuff that is viewed in the context of, could this team repeat? And that just becomes really fun. So I think this is, for a lot of people, probably the most enjoyable offseason in basketball for a very long time.
Yeah, and couldn't agree more with that. We have a cool show, I think, kind of set up for you guys today at a minimum. Going to talk about new guards, going to talk about some of the stuff that Todd Golden said at his first media availability this week. Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So without any further ado, I guess, as we are on YouTube now, just make sure that you guys like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because all that stuff matters in terms of like actual sponsorships for the podcast proper. And like, to be honest, because it's an investment of Eric's and I's time, if that happens, then maybe you get more podcasts. But right now we're very Patreon driven. So patreon.com/FloridaBBHour is where you're going to get all our content, as opposed to our pop-up podcast shows that, are fun, but Eric and I haven't done a ton of lately. So the first thing that I mentioned was just assistants and how Todd Golden is divvying that up. He said Jonathan Sapphire will continue to be Florida's co-general manager along with Todd Golden. Carlin Hartman having a bigger say in personnel now too, but Saff staying in that role, and then will be one of the guys tasked with helping run the defense in the departure of John Anderjek. I caught up with John for the book I'm writing in Bowie's Creek out there. I don't know. I guess it was like a week and a half ago now. I think it was September 11th or September 10th. Either way, I was out in Bowie's Creek. It was good to catch up with John, talk defense, talk his new job at Campbell. Seems like a cool place. Great arena for a mid-major, by the way. Gotta say, loved seeing the Convocation Center. All of it looks fun. It was nice to talk to John a little bit, but Saff, along with new assistant Dave Klasky, I guess are going to kind of adopt. Sorry, I didn't mean to blind you, Fawcett. They're going to adopt the role that Andrew Jack left behind and run the defense. Todd said there won't be an offensive coordinator per se. They're not going to replace Hub. It'll be by committee with Todd Golden as the head coach in charge of Florida's offense.
Yeah, which was interesting because there was definitely talk when Klatsky was hired that he would be an offensive coordinator, both because of what he did at Colgate when he was an assistant, where they were very, very good offensively. NYU was also very, very good offensively. And not to turn this entire thing into a Patreon plug, but there will be a Dave Klatsky NYU film study. So when I keep saying we are putting out content on the Patreon, you are not going to get anywhere else. Just, show me who else is doing a Dave Klatsky NYU film study. So it was really fun to watch. I mean, they were really, really good. For those of you who don't know, NYU went to the Division III national championship game. They lost by 4 points in the national championship game. There was a little bit of controversy, as there always is in close basketball games. But whatever it was, they were within 2 buckets of winning a Division III national championship. And I don't know how many coaches have gone directly from Division III to high major assistant. I mean, I'm sure it's happened probably even more than I can think of at the moment, but man, do I love it. I think there's just so many good coaches at different levels of the sport. And it's obviously, it's not like most guys that are really successful at the Division III level have been doing it for a long time with no Division I looks. Obviously, Klatsky's a little bit different in that he was at Colgate for like a decade and then got the Division III opportunity, which also not a lot of guys would have done. I mean, a lot of guys just once they get to the Division I level, they would never go to lower levels to take a head coaching job. And I absolutely love that for him. He did it. He had success, and now he's got a very coveted assistant job at Florida. So love that story for Klatsky. But again, I do think it's interesting, going back to what you said, that he'd be handling the defense, not being the offensive coordinator that a lot of us expected or was maybe implied during the time of the hiring. So that's notable. And I do think it's somewhat notable that Golden wants to take over the offense, or to whatever extent. Obviously, like you said, there's not really an offensive coordinator, but Golden has always been someone who's been known as more of a defensive guy. And for him to say that he wants to kind of take more of the reins offensively, pretty interested to see what that amounts to. Would be interesting to hear from him maybe at some point about the motivations about that. But whatever the case may be, even if Dave Klatsky is not an offensive coordinator, and maybe if it's not even his focus because he's focused on the defensive side, I know that he will have good offensive knowledge from his time at Colgate and even what he showcased as a head coach at NYU. And I think that anytime high major head coaches want to bring in guys with guys with head coaching experience at lower levels, I think it is a really smart thing to do. So quite happy with that hire. Obviously made a lot of sense to promote Jonathan Safire. I mean, I'll just be honest as well, when it comes to some of these other high major programs that are hiring general managers, like in that sole role, and some of the backgrounds those guys have, it just sounds like a crazy allotment of resources to me, to be honest with you. And I know there's not every assistant coach has the ability to do what Safire's doing, where he can coach and he can also handle some of the negotiations, some of the strategy when it comes to allotting resources and all of that. But whatever the case may be, I am absolutely not clamoring for Florida to get some GM in the mold of the GMs that a lot of other teams are hiring. I would much rather have someone like a Safire. So happy with that choice. And before we go on, Neil, I'm putting you on the spot here, but you mentioned you talked to Anderchik for your book. I know a lot of people who follow on Twitter will know what you were referencing, but for some people who maybe have missed that, would you let them know what you're working on, and maybe even if you're comfortable with it, a little bit of an update at what stage of the project you're on?
Yeah, thanks so much, man. That means a lot. So I'm writing a book on the 2024-2025 Florida Gators. We got a name. We got somebody that wants to put it out in the world for us. We're working on the second portion of the name because it's going to be like a semicolon type thing. It's not as catchy as Season on the Brink, but I like that the Underdog Legacy is the name. That comes from a quote that Elijah Martin gave me, actually, right before his senior night, and I thought that was so cool that Elijah and I got to revisit that quote before the Final Four, and he kind of expanded on it. and said he felt like their legacy was the underdog legacy, and made the point that, Zay Brown was the highest recruited player in the program. And he was, not knocking Zay at all, who was a freshman. He was just kind of saying, like, look, if you think about it, we're coached by a former walk-on, and Zay Brown is the highest recruited guy here. Like, nobody was supposed to be playing high major basketball that is here, and now we're 2 games away from winning the national title. And so when I decided to write the book shortly after they won the championship, that was why I named it that. It is not going to be just about the basketball season. I don't want to get too deep into that aspect of it right now, but I will say that, like, obviously many of you know my father passed away a couple of years ago now of cancer, and very quickly, and much younger than most people, certainly lower than the average age on the mortuary table, right? And our big connection had always been Florida and Carolina basketball, like 2 most important sports to us. Were really the same sport and just 2 teams. And basketball was a way of bonding. And so some of the book will be about how I think I was able to use last season and a really unexpected run to a national title to help grief, and to help confront some of the grief that I hadn't yet confronted. So some of it will be about fathers and sons, I think. And a lot of it will be backstories that a lot of people don't know about this team, about the process that went into building this team. In terms of where we are on it, I mean, outlines are done. Interviews are finally done. John Andrzejczyk was the last guy. Although, interestingly, I started writing and got this urge to talk to the Hanlochtons. So we'll see. I haven't decided, but like, over 50 interviews that I did. Florida has been great. Shout out Denver Parlor and all those guys. They have been incredible with their time. Coach Golden, all of them. So I really hope that this thing is done by Thanksgiving. The initial goal was a little earlier than that, and it really was just a scheduling on some of these interviews that pushed things back, not any other reason. But definitely want to make sure it's out. And when there's a pre-order option, we will get that out to people. So, Underdog Legacy is coming, as is a new regular season. And I got to say, I don't know if this was the most fascinating thing that Todd said the other day, Eric, but like the idea behind the guards is playing out a little bit like I kind of thought it would, where they evaluated and Boogie missed time. So they even had time to look at Xavier Lee from Princeton in a different role, maybe with Boogie out with the hernia. And Boogie's going to be the guy who takes the ball up the court most of the time. Xavier's going to play a lot off the ball, and they're going to go from there. So I guess the first question I have for you sort of is like your thoughts on that setup and structure, and like Florida's guards kind of holding the key to the season. I think there's going to be so much attention on how good the front court is, and really like Florida's ceiling is kind of defined by Xavier Lee and Boogie Fland.
Yeah, I think so. Just for the exact reason you said, the front court is quite a known commodity at this point, and so it's hard to say like, well, the front court's going to need to be better if the Gators are going to win a championship again or something like that. Like the front court could be just as good as they were last year, and that would be good enough. And again, we could get into the fact that Alex Condon didn't even play his best in the NCAA tournament due to injury. So even just right there, if it's healthy Condon and everyone else is the same, I mean, already the front court's better. But whatever the case may be, when you invest heavily in the important positions of ball handlers and guards, it's going to be super important. And for Florida to go kind of the opposite route of last year, where last year they didn't have guys that we went into the season saying these are point guards. That was kind of the talk was, okay, they've got 2 combo guards, and does two guys who are kind of secondary ball handlers. Does that equal one point guard? They will go on to win a national championship, of which, I mean, I also do think it's quite interesting as well that Florida didn't say, okay, well, we just won with 3 combo guards on the floor last year. Let's go get a bunch of combo guards and like no true point guards and, run it back. They kind of still said like, oh no, we'd still really like some ball handling and passing and vision. And, it's great now. I mean, we can go back and we can joke about all the pick 6 turnovers I always used to joke about with Walter Clayton, that we always talk about them because Walter Clayton would throw them and then they'd still win the game by 12. Like, so
yeah,
we can laugh about it, but there's another universe where some of those not having a ball handler on the floor situations could have really, really stung the Gators. It didn't, which is great, but I love to see that the staff didn't think, and this happens sometimes where, you win big, whether it's a championship or a Final Four. How many times have we seen coaches make a Final Four? Maybe not championship quite as much, but it has happened. Guys make championship games, or they win a championship, they make a Final Four, they make a championship game, and people are like, oh my goodness, like, Kevin Ollie wins a championship, like, UConn is back, or, oh man, Scott Drew just won an NCAA tournament with a bunch of JUCO players. Like, Baylor's going to win, 5 of the next, they might never lose again. And, Drew's a great coach, and not to say anything bad about Ollie, but like, there's some guys, and I'm not even talking about the ones who have made some Cinderella Final Four runs, that I think use it as confirmation that just whatever they're doing is the way to be doing something, and they continue to do that, and it doesn't win them games in the future. And just by the way that Florida has changed the way they built their roster, it kind of shows me that they're not thinking, okay, well, we won a championship. That's clearly every single thing we did was 100% the best way to do things. Like, sometimes you win, and you win in spite of things. You don't win a championship, and that validates every single decision you make. And so I do like to see that Florida kind of swung the opposite direction and had multiple ball handlers. So in terms of the way that Golden said that they were going to have, Flan take up the ball and dead ball scenarios, it does make a ton of sense to me. And this is, again, just another plug I have to make for the Patreon, because if you just heard a lot about these guys, but you haven't actually watched a lot of Xavier Lean, you haven't actually watched a lot of Boogie Flan, going and watching the film studies on Patreon is just an awesome way to get a feel of what they do. And I do think that, for lack of a better term, Fland would be more of the traditional point guard, whereas Xavier Lee is a little bit more of your kind of modern scoring guard. And Lee is a willing passer, don't get me wrong. His assist percentage is incredible. He gets a ton of dimes, and you saw that even with Canada this summer as he played with the Canadian under-23 team. But it still is like, he is wired to score. He gets a piece of paint, and when he can totally breaks down a defense and sees defenders, he makes the next read, which is awesome. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but in terms of getting his team into offense, giving the ball up a little bit earlier, I would say that that's Fland. And relative to playing Lee and Fland together, it does make a lot more sense to me to have Fland as your, if you have to put a label on it, more traditional point guard who's getting the table set, where Lee can be someone who is just, well, like, Lee is wired to score. There's no question about it. So would you rather have that guy starting a possession or ending a possession? To me, I'd rather that guy ending a possession. The one reason that I thought it might be more interesting to have Fland off the ball a little bit more is because while Lee is a great 3-point shooter at this point in his career, most of his threes have been off the dribble, where he's shot the ball incredibly, which is a very valuable skill. Like Trey Mann-esque, if people remember just seeing him launch threes off the dribble, or of course Walter Clayton. But he has not been as good shooting off the catch, but he also just hasn't had as many opportunities there. So it's a little bit of small sample size. Whereas Fland has been the much better catch and shoot off-ball shooter. So there's maybe some thought there that, oh, you get Lee on the ball where he can maybe create a little bit more. And then if the possessions end with Fland taking catch and shoot threes, that's great. But at the same time, I do think if you give the ball to Lee early, you're going to have some possessions where, he dribbles it a lot and he goes and tries to make something happen himself, and he can absolutely make something happen. There's a reason that every team in the country wanted him. But I think for a really high functioning, efficient offense, the right move is, if you have to put labels on them, Fland being the point guard and Lee being a little bit more of the off guard.
Yeah, love that. So it was interesting though. Like they talked about, and we're going to get into the front court. Obviously, no commodity, but I think people wanted to know, like, okay, so what's going on? What's the word? What's going on behind our guy, Boogie Fland and Xavier Lee? And I think I've got it all set up on audio now. So here is what Todd Golden had to say about that. You may recognize some of the people asking questions.
Those two guards, specifically in Irby and Alex Lloyd, has been a bright spot for us. He's practiced really, really well. And so I'm not sure what exactly his role is going to be, but he's given us confidence that he can help us a little bit. And all those guys can get up the floor quickly. I think Boogie and Xavier, that's one of their best talents, is how explosive they are in transition and their quickness in decision-making. So we will – and Tommy, although he's, big, he runs like a guard. So I think we'll be able to get up the court pretty quick this year.
Do you think you guys – maybe one way to compensate for the shot making is being just elite in transition because of the quickness of those guards? And obviously your bigs run better than anyone in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's our goal. We want to play as many possessions in transition as possible. So if we can 5% more of our possessions in transition, I think that would really help us be able to make up for some of that lost efficiency. And I keep going back to the ball handling. We haven't done nearly a good enough job yet taking care of the ball. But I think Boogie had a great assist turnover ratio last year. Xavier was fantastic, and Tommy and those guys are great for front court players in terms of taking care of it. So I think collectively, as we continue to get comfortable playing together, that should be an area that, I think we were 73rd in America in turnover rate last year. My goal is to be top 25 that way with this year's team.
And then a little Christian Anderson maybe to Alex Lloyd's game, just kind of his toughness, even despite his size, his ability to make shots.
Yeah, that's a very fair comparison. I think Christian's a really good player. And Alex, coming in, being a little slight and just never been at this level before, you wonder how long, especially for a guard, it's going to take him to adjust. But he's played with a lot more poise and just calmness than we thought he would. And I mean, Boogie is shown to be one of the better on-ball defenders we've been around in a while. And just for Alex to have to go against that every day in practice, and he's hanging on to his guts and he's competing the right way, we think he has a chance.
So kind of interesting stuff there, because like the initial question, which you didn't hear, was sort of what is going on behind him and what's going on behind Lee and Xavier. And there appears now, obviously they have 39 days of practice to go, and they're going to figure stuff out more as things continue. But like the idea right now is that a top 50 freshman has kind of outpaced some other people. And that minutes are going to be hard to come by, I think. But where there are available minutes behind Fland and Lee. And it looks like Alex Lloyd is in position to challenge for those. Another reason to go to the Patreon and kind of see like where some of that. He's a fun player. Like he can really score in a lot of different ways, Eric.
Yeah, I know I always caveat this when I talk about freshmen, and I will just continue to do so. Like when it comes to transfers, when it comes to players that have played at the Division I level, or now that there's guys who have played pro in Europe, like I will really stand by my evaluations of these players. I am not as confident, generally speaking, in the evaluations of high school players. Just something I haven't done as much, as well as, I mean, for years, it was just so hard to watch these guys. It was like you just hope that there was a game or two on YouTube from their high school. Now it is definitely great that a lot of guys that play at top schools, those schools are using Synergy where I can watch film, and that is why there will be film. There is a film study on Alex Lloyd, and there's also going to be one on CJ Ingram. So while I should give the caveat of I do not speak with the same level of authority on high school players that I do on any other players we discuss on the show, every time I watch Alex Lloyd, he's incredible. And I think that people are used to me fading every high school player, whether it's on Florida's team or opponents. If you right. For years, freshmen have been overrated by everyone in college basketball. They almost always fall short of expectation. And if you just took the standpoint that guys would not be as good as hype most of the time, you would be, you'd be right. now you look at Alex Lloyd, and every time I watch him play, I cannot believe he is not ranked higher. I cannot believe he does not have more hype, just in terms of general people that follow recruiting and follow college basketball that are evaluating freshmen. I love Alex Lloyd every time I've watched him play. And again, is that a massive sample size? No, I also did go through as much, film as I could for this film study. And every time I see a guy who is big, or tall ball handler, not big, as Golden mentioned when he referred to him as slight, I believed, which is accurate.
It's fair, yeah.
But he is just incredibly skilled, incredible first step, brilliant shooter, reminded me a lot of a Trey Mann, except, you look even at his percentages in high school, and his percentages are even better while playing at a higher level a little bit. Neil, you can maybe correct me. Not that Trey Mann played at not a high level, but Westminster playing at an even higher level. You'll also see
Trey didn't play as many national games, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when you watch my film study, you'll see that, you'll see Lloyd playing against the Boozer twins. And so Neil, I guess I will just, while I'm usually not one to really stand by my evaluations of freshmen and don't feel as confident in my evaluations of freshmen, and I'm normally just not as high on freshmen, Lloyd, I think, is tremendous. I think this guy is going to really push for whatever minutes you want to talk about, like backup 3, backup 2, whatever it is. I see him as one of the more athletic, one of the more skilled, one of the better shooters guys on the team. And I probably could have watched a little bit more, or had a little bit more keen eye on the defensive end, just to have a little bit of a more idea of where he stands there, where his slight frame might, hurt him there. But man, offensively, I think this is already one of the best shot makers, higher skilled guys on the roster. I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah. With Alex, in high school, the thing was always he gambles. He's going to try to get into passing lanes because he's got nice length. And he's quick. So he's going to try to get steals. It's going to be tougher for him on the ball, just like it was tougher for Christian Anderson on the ball. He's going to be a guy who, it's going to be an education on straight line drives, things like that. Luckily Florida's got a lot of rim protectors and bigs that he can funnel people to, and they're going to have to coach him to do that. But they will. Look, I don't know. Malik is saying it's interesting that Malik says if he's mostly next to Boogie or Xavier when he's on the floor, it feels feasible for him to be able to. Yeah, and I think he will be. I mean, they're never going to ask. They didn't recruit him as a point guard. He was never going to be a point guard, and nor was he the point guard at Westminster. He played pretty consistently in the Walter Clayton 2 role. They got a kid named DJ Gaines who is now kind of climbing the charts, who is another guy that's going to come out of that program, make somebody pretty happy, probably a mid-major player because he's even slighter than slight, jitterbuggy, 5'9", 5'10", but he handled the ball 50% of the time for the Lions last year. So I don't think Alex is ever going to be asked to do that, but he's going to play off the ball, and I think he's going to score. And I think if you do that, and then you get Urban Klavzar making shots, and again, everybody in the program told me they thought he had a good summer mainly because he put on weight and strength and muscle and just kept working on his shooting and coming off screens and shooting more, because the big thing with Urban, I think, is how much of the ball does he actually need to be impactful as an offensive player?
Yeah, Klavzar, I absolutely love his game. I'm still not 100% convinced it's what translates to what Golden is looking to do and the high major level. And I forget if I have released it on Gator Country or not, but I did write an article about Klavzar and just what it might take for him to take the next step. And watching the film back, the defense is even worse than I think we thought. That's the one thing for him. And being 5'10" and not super athletic, it's a tough existence. And that's where I think that the weight added and more time in the strength and conditioning program will be big, because I do think offensively, I think that's a guy you could start on most high major. If Florida said, hey, we were going to start him next to Fland and Lee, I'm not saying they would, but 100% that would be just no problem. He'd figure it out. He'd find his role. And offensively, I think he really is tremendous, but the defense is just was really, really rough. And you'd have to be a even more impactful offensive player, which again, that's where is he ever going to really have the ball in his hands enough to be impactful enough offensively that it makes up for the defensive limitations? And I just don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. So I do feel like he's going to have to guard at a closer to league average level to see a bigger role, but I will be happy anytime he goes on the court. I love his game, as people know. And also he could have gone and played for Estonia for Slovenia in Eurobasket. He chose not to, chose to stay with the Gators. And obviously it would have been a pretty big commitment for him time-wise if he were to go play in that FIBA event, like maybe close to a month, if not more, when it was training camp and then the event that's pretty long. So that's something where he chose to stay in Florida and work out. And I think that shows just his kind of dedication to what he's where his focus is, because it would have been really easy for him to go play in Europe for a little bit in the summer and go compete for his country. And I was, would have been cool to see him out there against some really high level competition, but also great that he stayed in Florida.
Yeah, man. And he's going to be key to the answer to the question, because this is one that was a little listener driven. It was more like I ran into people who are fans of the podcast, which is the weirdest thing that has happened only recently. And I don't even think what's funny is, with the exception of one of these instances, it wasn't even in Gainesville. And so that's pretty interesting, because obviously when I moved, I was like, well, maybe somebody will know. And it's happened in Publix once. But anyway, I was in Tampa for work, and someone asked if I was, hey, you look like Neil Blackman, the guy that does Florida Basketball Hour. And I said, yeah, I am. And he's like, I love what you and Eric do. And he's like, so my nightmare is that this Florida team doesn't shoot well enough to compete deep into March. And it was funny because then I, of course, naturally went into a tailspin and drove home for at least an hour of my 2-hour drive back to the Ville thinking, man, what if they don't shoot well enough? Well, Urban Klabsar would certainly help answer that question. The one point I would make, as I've gotten to thinking about it more, is that Tommy Houck actually shot a pretty high percentage from the perimeter last year, especially for somebody that's 6'9". Savion Lee, everybody keeps talking about how his game will translate to the SEC. And obviously, I think it's fair to ask those questions, especially given the physicality shift. But the Ivy League is a really good league, and I've emphasized that point. And I think making that criticism is fine as long as you acknowledge that, in KenPom, the Ivy League was, I think, a top 10 league last year. So it's not like the leap from, say, I don't know, the MAAC and Iona to the SEC. I'm not saying that he's going to be Walter Clayton. Don't ever interpret it that way. I'm just saying that there was a leap for Walt too, right? And it was a bigger leap. So anyway, and remember, Walt didn't get those big. He didn't get those big D1 football looks because of perceptions of athleticism and physicality deficits. So, there were questions about whether he would adjust to that level. The point is, in terms of shooting, with Alex Lloyd and Urban Klabsar, with Tommy Houck's ability to bang shots, I'm a little less concerned about it. I do think that obviously, the question for Florida, Eric, at least in my mind, interested in your perspective, is who gets the ball late in the game, right? Who's the player that bails you out? I don't think Florida's coming back from down 9 points with 2.5 minutes to go because somebody goes nuts like Walt did again. But also those things happen once a decade in our sport.
Yeah, I think the shooting concern is valid. Okay, I'll say why I think it's valid. I'll say why I don't think it's valid. On one hand, I do think that Xavier Lee, who makes a lot of tough shots, you could see that percentage coming down. And he was someone who shot 37% last year. So it wasn't like he was an incredible percentage shooter. And again, he took so many off the dribble where he was really good that you also wonder if he takes less shots, which he likely will do at Florida. He'll get some higher looks, so maybe that's a little bit better. But you could also point to the fact that the year prior he was 34%. So it's not like he's had this long heralded career of shooting at a super high level. Fland was like I mentioned, he was a really good catch and shoot player. He was really bad shooting off the dribble. So he ended up being at 35%. So again, good, but not great. But then I'd say kind of the other thing that I would point out is that it wasn't really like Florida was a great 3-point shooting team last year. Outside Walter Clayton, like Walter Clayton again hit a lot of tough ones, but like Elijah Martin was able to hold like a good solid percentage at high volume and at 35%. And Will Richard was another guy who had, who was able to hold a really good volume at 36%. But it wasn't like the Gators had all these 40% guys that are out the door. So I don't know. I think the season is going to be more related to can Florida create open shots than it'll be do they not have the shooters, because I don't want to like these guys are now NBA players, guys that were drafted in Elijah Martin and Will Richard, but I feel like those guys were solid shooters but not great ones, but the Gators got them great shots, and that's why the team was ultimately a good 3-point shooting team. So on one hand, it's just looking at the shooters out the door versus who came in. It's you can kind of put the similarity between Xavier Lee and Walter Clayton. Of course, Walter Clayton has really proven it at the highest level. So I'm not saying it's a 1-for-1, but you hope that's something close. And then I think you look at Fland, who has, at least in a shortened season, shot the ball well or good enough. Shot it really well off the catch. You hope he replaces the off the catch shooting of Martin and Richard, which is something that, I totally do believe he can do. And then it's what do you get from an Alex Lloyd, who could be an elite shooter even right away, and a Klavzar, who could also be an elite shooter. So we'll see. But especially with Florida at least starting big, that is it's a reason for some concern. I just don't see a world where it's just a dreadful shooting team, I suppose. Could be average, could be certainly not as good as last year. I don't think there's ever a situation where they're just terrible.
I think that's totally fair. And would agree with that. 2017 Gonzaga has been a team that's been super interesting to me. As I look at this Florida roster, and I look at what Florida's idea is with Tommy Houck at the 3. For those that don't know, that Gonzaga team played for the national championship and lost a fairly epic game to the North Carolina Tar Heels, who captured their 7th national championship with the victory. Not that I'm counting. And that Gonzaga team had Nigel Williams-Goss as their, one of their guards. They had a big man named Prezimek Karnewski, who was a real problem. He was kind of tough to move. He was super skilled. If he got to his right shoulder, forget it. You were doomed. He was just really good. They had a guy that came off the bench named Zach Collins, who I don't know what he went in the draft, Fawcett. I think he went in the top 5. Pretty good. Jordan Matthews was another one of their guards at 6'4". Jonathan Williams was their guy who started at the 3 for 10 games and started at the 4 for the rest of the games. Josh Perkins and Killian Tilly rounded out their rotation. Rui didn't even play on that team, man. He was a seldom used freshman who got minutes at an 8.2% rate, according to KenPom. That team was loaded. But what was interesting was they really had 3 guys who were 6'9" or bigger the whole year. And somehow, they finished 16th in offensive efficiency, which was pretty good for a team playing with 3 bigs. Their spacing was a little bit wonky at times. I watched them play Florida in a great game in Orlando, and thought that, that was one way the Gators were able to string together some stops. But the main thing they was just absolutely nightmarish defensively. They were first in KenPom defense. They were ridiculously brutal on the defensive glass in terms of like being very good. And it's interesting. It's just an interesting profile. I know you had Riley Davis on, and he talked about what last year's Florida team reminded him of. As a preliminary matter, I kind of look at that Gonzaga team and see a little bit of Florida this year.
Yeah, that frontcourt rotation is really big. It would lose me a little bit just in that Nigel Williams-Goss. I don't know if you heard when
he was a tank too.
Well, just like if you heard Rick Pitino saying that there's no point guards anymore, he had that like quote. I forget who he was talking about.
Yeah, this summer.
He was just saying like there's no point guards anymore. There's just like all combo guards, which I totally I know he's exaggerating slightly, but the point he's making is a pretty good one. Like you just have all these scoring guards, and Nigel Williams-Goss was still like as pure a point guard as it gets. So also had, and then you had Josh Perkins, who was definitely a point guard. So they really did have the I would say two true point guards, and Josh Perkins went on to be the starting point guard next year on a team that was like really good as well. So that's and then you look at the three where they definitely had. Like that's where they had the Silas Melson, like Jordan Matthews. So, like the front court is a good, I don't know. The front court is something that is definitely reminds me a lot of how Florida could kind of play. And then I do think kind of stylistically in the way that Gonzaga played really fast while also playing two true bigs. That's obviously something you're going to see from Florida. Yeah. I just think that, Nigel Williams-Goss and Josh Perkins are still a different profile than a Fland and Lee to me. But again, I think it's the ability to play fast while also, being able to play fast while also still having really good post players and a lot of size and rebounding the ball really well. And obviously, Few's had a lot of success with that for a long time. And it was probably the success of Few around about this era when Golden was getting involved in WCC basketball that he saw that, why this could work at the highest level.
Yeah, no, I mean, Florida has not, if you talk to the staff, like they've not shied away from the fact that they kind of went in and had some early battles with Gonzaga, and they were like, man, we cannot compete with this. Like we can't compete with the rim pressure on either side. And, will this work at the power level? And then obviously Tommy Lloyd went over to Arizona a year before Todd got to Florida and basically did the same thing. And it was pretty darn effective in the Pac-12 immediately. And so Florida has incorporated a lot of that into what they're doing. I think more people are going to start playing two bigs. It's fascinating, because you look at their minutes distribution and they had Jonathan Williams, they had Silas Melson, I think didn't play as much come March. But, if you would put Tommy Houck on that team, he would have fit in beautifully with what they were trying to do just because of how he runs. Are you worried about anything with the three bigs, like Tommy guarding smaller wings? I mean, I don't ever worry about him too much defensively because of his effort. But again, I mean, I still think at some point, there are mismatches to be had with three bigs on the floor.
Yeah, my worry is just that you neutralize the advantage he has once you put him in a situation where smaller guys are going to guard him. Why is Houck a good player? It's because he handles the ball really well and is really fast for a four. And I think that moving that player to the three, where he inherently doesn't have a defender that's as slow-footed, is going to be shorter and probably more capable of bothering Houck. I just wonder if you neuter the biggest advantage that Houck has as a player. And again, it's never going to be like a disaster or anything like that. Like Houck will find ways to be effective generally, but I just feel like on the offensive end, if it's someone, and I think we'll see again as well how well he can shoot the ball and how well Condon can shoot the ball. But does this become a situation, if we are going to be worried about shooting, where Condon is whatever you want to say, below average shooting 4 when he's in that position? And you look at Hauk, if like we'll see if he's 34%, but that would be like, okay for a wing. And then if it's Fland who's okay, and we'll see with Lee, like there's situations where it's like, okay, they're no longer having the same paint touch advantages they have. Their spacing is going to be worse, and they don't have shooting to punish when Xavier Lee's getting paint touches and looking for someone to spray the ball to. So I still don't think it's the optimal build. Like there's no question. I'm not saying it's going to be a problem for sure, but I just still think that Florida's best option is Condon at the 5 and Hauk at the 4. And if you don't believe me, I mean, well, like, let's see the first time that Florida gets into a tough game and it's 2 minutes left and it's one, and they're playing, if they're playing Arizona opening night of the season and it's a game within a couple of possessions with 3 minutes left, let's see who Florida has on the floor. If they have Hauk at the 3, then yeah, they believe it's the best way to play. If they don't, which I don't think they will, that tells you everything you need to know. So, but in terms, and that's of course the other big part of it too. We go into last season and we say, we go 2 seasons ago, and I'm saying, I don't think Micah Handlockton should start, and he ends up starting. But whenever things were serious, he didn't play. Last year, I kind of was like, I don't actually think Ruben Chiniello should start, and he ends up starting. And but when it's whatever nut crushing time or whatever Golden called it after the in the NCAA tournament, when it's the big moments, they're late. Like the guys on the floor, the front court is Hauk and Condon. So unless that changes, then like whatever Florida does for the first 4 minutes of the game, first 4 minutes of the second half doesn't really matter. Like I care about what happens in the biggest moments of the game, and I just presume that'll be Condon and Hauk in the front court. Becomes a little bit more intriguing about who's going to be the wing alongside Fland and Lee. But the only time this really becomes like a very interesting story is, again, if Florida's playing Arizona or whoever else in their preseason or in their non-conference portion of the season, and it's a tight game, and in the final minute, Hauk is still at the 3 and Chiniello or Handlockton's at the 5 next to Condon. Like that's when this actually becomes, a story.
Yeah. That's great stuff. I want to answer Kai's question. Might have missed it. How deep you think a rotation will go? Like, I do think it'll be 8 or 9. Like, I think Micah Handlockton certainly plays. Alex Lloyd is going to play. I think Urban Klavzar is going to play. And then, Todd Golden made a joke about the Brown brothers competing for minutes with one another. We'll see how much they love each other, he said. So like that would be 9. Quite honestly, like that would be kind of where I expect things to be come that point in time. So the last one we're going to get into, I saw Malik's comment about the Knicks joining the 2 big club. Yeah, I mean, Mitchell Robinson was playing next to Karl Anthony Towns in the Pacers series pretty consistently. Like I don't even think they're doing that. Like, yes, I think the Knicks are going to do that. They're going to continue to do that like they did in the playoffs. Just Bruce Pearl stepping away. Look, it's controversial. There were even controversies about the controversy, right, with the Wilbon stuff, Michael Wilbon stuff. To me, like I felt like no matter when Bruce would have stepped away, if he was going to step away this year, they would have hired Stephen Pearl, largely because I shouldn't say no matter when. Like if he stepped down the day after the Final Four, then maybe they don't. But as soon as Chad Pruitt retired in May, who's Bruce's long-term right-hand man assistant, like it seemed to me like if Bruce stepped away, Stephen would take over. He was their defensive coordinator. They were one of the best defenses in the country the last 2 years. I think he's respected in coaching circles. I understand the hints of nepotism here. And I also think that like when you think about where Auburn was prior to Bruce Pearl and you think about where they've been in the last decade, it's kind of, there's a lot of tinfoil hattery going on.
Yeah. Like I'm not a fan of him stepping down here, and I do find the narratives around it really bizarre, to be quite honest. Like on one hand, there's a lot of media members who were killing Tony Bennett for leaving Virginia and retiring when he did. And I was also someone who's very critical about that timing. So I'm being consistent here. There's a lot of media members who were killing Bennett for doing it. And now we're like, oh, like it's just awesome what Pearl did at Auburn. And like, yeah, it was always, obvious that it was going to be his son. So like, if it was so obvious, then why wasn't it in the contract? Yeah. Why, if it was so obvious, why didn't Bruce Pearl just retire a couple months ago? So it's very clear that it wasn't obvious that they would have just hired Pearl. Because if it was obvious, he wouldn't have done what he just did. So I think that I think it's quite black and white that it was not a given that they would just hire Pearl, Stephen Pearl, and I have no opinion on hiring Pearl. Like I'm really interested to see what it'll be like, but it's just irrelevant to me. The fact of the matter is, like, there's guys who came to Auburn under the promise that they were going to play for Bruce Pearl, and those guys have no options now. And guys that wouldn't have, if it was Stephen Pearl, that might, and this did happen, close to after the Final Four, and they hire Pearl. There's some guys that might have gone elsewhere. I don't know if they would for sure. NIL money, still NIL money, but Auburn was able to get some guys below NIL market value because of the coach, because of the recent success they had. So I feel for these players, and yes, they can hypothetically transfer out, but all the teams that are of substance won't be able to take them because they don't have NIL money or scholarship space available. So I feel for these players that I think got kind of screwed in this situation. And so I don't like how this went down. I don't think that this is a good kind of precedent. And if everyone is so sure that Stephen Pearl was always the guy, then it would have been in the contract. He would have been coach in waiting. It would have been a situation like when Kelvin Sampson retires, it'll be Kellen Sampson. Like, people know this, no ambiguity. So even if Kelvin Sampson decides to retire tomorrow, it's not going to be a situation of like, oh, he only did this because there's no other, that's the only way he can get a son hired.
Yeah,
no, everyone knows that that's what's happening. So there doesn't need to be ambiguity. Pearl doing this, I can't believe people keep saying, oh, it's obvious it would have been Pearl, because if it was so obvious, Bruce Pearl wouldn't have stepped down the way he did. So I don't love it, but man, Pearl just did incredible stuff at Auburn. I think the job he did was miraculous. I really enjoyed how his teams played, and personality wise, I know that some people won't agree with a lot of his beliefs on things, and I would be one of those people, but I am someone who always wants coaches to have, just generally speaking, more personality. I want coaches to talk more to the media. I want coaches to be much more open. And for me to want those things, it would not be fair for me to then say, oh, but if they're open about something that I don't agree with, I don't want it anymore. So I think that, I would love for more coaches with all kinds of beliefs to be as open as Pearl was, talking to media, being available for anything. So definitely think that the sport and the SEC will miss him. It definitely becomes really interesting just to see what Stephen Pearl kind of brings, how they'll play differently. It makes that super intriguing for sure. And just in terms of the because there's so many people that don't seem to mind that he stepped down the way he did, the time he did. I'm not in the same boat.
So I guess, the only point I made that is even in conflict with that a little bit is just that I felt like Chad Pruitt retired in mid-May. So when Chad Pruitt, who was the associate head coach there for 5 years, retired, and Stephen Pearl became the associate head coach, like, it wasn't contractual. But to me, it was like, if they stick with him, or at some point, Pearl probably could have stepped down and said, you should hire my son. Now, obviously, he didn't do that. He stepped down where they were left with very little choice. So there is a difference there. In terms of what it does for players, I think it's going to become increasingly common that, like, in order, especially in these long-term situations, like a Kelvin Sampson, like, we know who his successor is going to be, but I do think there will be situations where coaches do what Bennett and Pearl did to keep talent on campus. Now, obviously, Tahad Pettiford and Hall and who's the kid from Miss State, Keyshawn Murphy, they can all potentially go to different schools, but not really, like Eric said, because no one has money, no one has roster space. there's not really much that they can do. I saw Arkansas people were trying to do some fuzzy math to create a scholarship the other day because they're like, we can get Todd Pettiford. It's like, yeah, that's not going to happen the way this is. And Stephen Pearl said they expect to keep everybody. In terms of Bruce, just the human being, yeah, I mean, look, I don't always agree with the stuff that he said, and the public-facing comments that he made, but he was wonderful in his interactions with me. I loved his personality. I felt like he is a guy who genuinely cared about his players, and gave them platforms, even when they didn't agree with him. Looking back at some of the stuff that happened during Black Lives Matter and the platform that he gave some of his players there, where I think maybe if you know stuff about Bruce's opinions, they were probably in conflict with some of those things, but he thought it was important that we had discussions and dialogue and conversations. And any of you that know me know I'm really big on those things, even when I don't agree with you. And so, I will miss him in the sport. I think it's a big loss for the SEC. And we will see. We will see what happens with Stephen Pearl. He got a ringing endorsement from his best friend, Todd Golden. As one might expect Todd Golden to give, but Todd's a national championship winning head coach now, so he didn't have to do that. He could have done that privately, did it very publicly. We will see what happens, but I don't know if it shakes up my perception of the SEC, but it does a little bit. Like, I kind of penciled Auburn into that top 4 because I just trust Bruce to get that out. Year 1 under Stephen Pearl, do I trust him as much when I cast my ballot next month at Media Days? I don't know, but those are conversations for another day. We have a Patreon-only listener episode coming up. Patreon.com/Florida Hour. Make sure that you subscribe. Stadium and Gale guys, Dan Thompson, Corey Knowles, Nick De La Torre. It's fun to be a part of your network. Thank you guys so much for letting us join you. I'll let Fawcett sign us off.
Go Gators and keep attacking closeouts.